Welcome to SUAANGAN. I'm your host, Janine Blake. On today's program, we bring you the results of a heritage survey that was completed here in the Inuvialuit settlement region. Inuvialuit Environmental and Geotechnical is an engineering, project management, and environmental science company. Its specialty is providing clients with the knowledge and technology they need to achieve sustainable development. IEG hosted a public information session to give the results of a regional heritage resource survey that was conducted in the Mackenzie Delta region. Kathy Bosch is an archaeologist with Inuvialuit Environmental and Geotechnical based out of Calgary. She traveled north in December 2001 to give an overview of the heritage resource survey. The public meeting in Inuvik was held at the Ingamo Hall Friendship Centre.
The Heritage Resource Survey in the Mackenzie Delta region was basically a regional heritage resource survey. It was completed in the summer and the fall.
The project objectives of the Heritage Resource Survey were to obtain accurate GPS readings for the location and size of previously documented heritage sites, to evaluate impacts to sites from the 2000-2001 seismic and drilling seasons, to conduct reconnaissance in areas where developments are planned for the winter 2001-2002, and to develop a predictive map model illustrating the distribution of heritage resources in the Mackenzie Delta.
Basically, an archaeological survey or heritage resource survey is the means of locating and evaluating sites of past human activities. Oftentimes, archaeological sites are the only ways that we have of seeing past evidence of past human cultures in a particular area. Such sites include places where people have lived, fought, worshipped, or been buried. The Heritage Resource Survey that we completed involved a two-step program. The first was pre-field studies that occurred in actually in mid-June of 2001. Myself and Dawn Hanna with Bison Historical Services went out to the Prince of Wales Northern Heritage Centre in Yellowknife, and we looked at the archival data both from ethnographic as well as the archaeological records, along with satellite images and air photo images, and correlated that data into a type of an overlay, a mental program of what the existing sites that had already been documented in the area. The No Gap archaeology program took place in the late 1970s in this area, and it discussed and documented a number of heritage sites within the region. We followed that up with a series of community consults about the middle of July in all three communities of Aklavik, Inuvik, and Tuk. We did one-on-one interviews with elders in these communities to find out traditional places where they would have hunted, fished, traditional berry picking areas, and the technology that they would have used to accomplish this fishing and technology. The type of things we're looking at in this area in itself is we're looking at artifacts, and artifacts can be as diverse as a single lithic stone flake or as complete village. We had various number of artifacts, stone and bone tools. Features included pits, hearths, middens or house ruins, burials, cairns. Now, like I mentioned earlier, the first part of the Heritage Resource Survey was going into previously documented and known sites in order to get correct GPS readings for their location and size. And the reason we did that is quite obvious from this slide. Prior to this year, all mapping of heritage sites in this region was using NTS mapping. That was the standard way of mapping for heritage sites. And what we found was that oftentimes when we went back to those original site maps, sometimes the heritage sites were off anywhere from 300 meters to about half a kilometer in distance. And this is a good example. This site was documented in 1994, originally documented by an archaeologist by the name of Ken Sweezy. consisted of some floor planking and some fish and caribou bone and a couple of stone scrapers. We went back into that site in the summer of 2001. We could not find it. We did notice, however, right across in this area here, ILA had gone in the winter of 2000 in order to fence off the site from potential seismic programs that were going on in the area. And they were fencing it off in the winter, of course, and that's where they presumed the location to be. We looked in that location, we could not find it. Finally, at the end of the summer, we could not find that site at all. When we went in the fall to do our second leg of our survey, we found it right on this peninsula here, and the distance between the recorded site in 1994 and 2001 is about 1 kilometer. So that gives you an idea of why we had to go in and fully document and record correct GPS readings for all the known heritage sites.
SUAANGAN will return after these messages for more on the Heritage Survey. We're back with the results of the Heritage Survey that was completed here in the ISR.
The second part of our phase after we had finished the pre-field research was a full helicopter survey of all planned activities for the 2001-2002 winter season. And what we did was we concentrated our areas along the coastlines. Most of our looking around the coastlines in particular. Coastlines are known to have to be very sensitive sites, sensitive areas for heritage resources. And when we were flying along the coastlines, we did what we call a low and slow approach. In other words, we were flying at heights of 150 feet and at speeds of about 30 knots. That enabled us to just cruise right along the shoreline there and to see anything that we could from the air itself. When we were connecting between sensitive areas, we were flying at heights of about 500 feet so as not to disturb any wildlife or disrupt people doing traditional land use activities. Once we spotted a potential site or a potential location from the air, we touched down. Basically, the foot reconnaissance consisted of a series of archaeologists just basically stretched out on a line about 3 feet apart from each of us, and we just walked in a parallel fashion, covering that whole entire area that we thought could produce a site. The final phase of the field reconnaissance included shovel testing. We only resorted to shovel testing if we couldn't find anything either from the air or when we did the foot reconnaissance. What shovel testing basically does is exactly that. We'd get out our shovels, dig a 1 meter by 1 meter square, usually down to the permafrost level, and we'd examine the dirt that we brought up. We didn't find anything in the dirt, but we had to go through that anyway just to make sure to rule out the possibility of anything being in there. We subsequently filled all of our holes so that to maintain the area as close as possible to its original condition. Now, part of the job of an archaeologist, once we see any artifacts, is to pick them up, to examine them, to photo sketch them, to make notes on their size and what we're dealing with. However, in keeping with community concerns and artifact conservation, none of the artifacts were collected. And I will add also that no human remains were picked up. Once we could definitely determine it was a grave, we just went in, did a complete GPS reading on it, and we left it alone. This is an example here. This piece right here is a chert scraper that's hafted onto an antler bowl handle, and this is an antler harpoon head. We did pick both of those features up, sketch them, and then return them back to the place that we found them. And like I said, the graves, illustrated by this cranium here, we just GPS recorded. The first part of the survey was regional in perspective. We revisited known and documented heritage sites and looked for new sites as well, assessed the impacts to the sites both in the summer and fall heritage resources. We came up with a total of 259 sites. 84 of the 250 sites were previously known and documented sites, and the remainder were new sites that we found both in the summer and fall heritage season.
The summer survey was, like I said, a two-stage approach. The revisiting of previously known sites resulted in accurate GPS recordings on 84 sites and the identification of 86 new sites. That is, new sites that had not ever been previously recorded or documented. The 86 new sites were largely pre-contact in nature, although we did have some traditional land use sites. And the summer survey, you can see on the map, is illustrated by the red dots. We concentrated our efforts on a regional perspective of the Delta. We covered up into North Richards Island. We flew out as far north as Pullen Island, Hendrickson Island, up in through here, and down into the Husky Lakes area, and south of Tucking in through this area here. The reason we did that, first off, we were looking at the archival data that we picked up from the Prince of Wales, and by and large, most of the archival data suggested that the majority of heritage sites would be concentrated in those areas there. And when you think about it, it really makes sense because that's the way the people would have traveled. They go along into the Beaufort Sea and traveled into the major routes, so that's where we would expect to find heritage sites. That is in contrast to sites in this area here, or in this area here, where we did not see a large number of sites. We did not record a large number of sites. It's not to say that they're not there, it's just that these channels that allowed ease of transportation is where we found the majority of sites. In August, the beginning of August, IEG staff held a meeting with ILA, and that resulted in us doing a second survey, the fall survey. ILA felt that with all the development taking place, that there were some sensitive areas that needed to be further examined. So we went in again on a lease-by-lease area to do the second fall survey, and we started that September 13th and pulled out of here October 1st. That produced an additional 89 new sites, indicated by the blue dots on this map. The 89 new sites were largely traditional land use sites. There were a couple of pre-contact, but mostly traditional land use, and some historic sites. So you can see from this map that areas that we did not survey in the summer, such as the lower delta near Clavic and the west side of Richards Island, when we went in to do the fall survey, gaps in our knowledge was filled in with this second survey. This is just another slide illustrating again the distribution of the 259 sites, and the operators' lease areas are shown in the yellow outlines, and the heritage sites are in the red dots. Now, site types that we isolated in the Delta can be grouped into three major areas. There's the pre-contact, the historic, and the traditional land use. The oldest known site in the Delta is about between 3,500 and 3,800 years old, and it is located in this area right in here. We call that the Choris site, C-H-O-R-I-S, and to date, that is the oldest known site in the Delta.
SUAANGAN will return after these messages for more on the Heritage Survey. We're back with the results of the Heritage Survey that was completed here in the ISR.
So this is what it's all about. It's about the people here, whether you're dealing with 500 years present or 1,000 years or 3,500 years ago. It was about their lifestyle, their subsistence patterns, and how they integrated with their environment. Pre-contact sites consisted of anything from a single stone flake to perhaps a whole village site, such as the pond site. The traditional rectangular log crib graves, house pits, that's up on North Richards Island. You'd see those from the chopper. Basically, they'd be very close to the shoreline, and they would be what we call house middens. They'd be grassy depressions right on the shoreline there. And then the pond site was a classic site located on the east side of Richards Island. And this site here was at one time just back from the top of this bluff here. It's now receding with all the erosion. It's sliding right down into the water's edge. We have cervical vertebrae from beluga whale, and those would have been used as foundations for many of the houses. We have parts of logs that would also be used. These were semi-subterranean log structures. That was quite a common method of building houses, particularly up in the Tuck area. And we also found evidence of pottery in this area. There are some pieces of fire-blackened pots, as well as an absolutely gorgeous polar bear tooth that had been used probably as a pendant. It had a hole right on the end of it, and we felt that it was likely used as a pendant. Historic sites were pretty much gathered, located right around the Inuvik area, and they included such areas as Reindeer Station. The historic sites were pre-World War II and centered around various world economies at that time within the region. Reindeer Station, of course, the introduction of reindeer herding in the Delta. The Semler Spur Farm, a little bit further away from Reindeer Station. Leonard F. Semler had the fur farm here, and he had a number of log structures. And this photograph was about 100 to 150 cages that would have been used for mink farming. Finally, the last site that we differentiated on was the traditional land use sites. Traditional land use sites are not what archaeologists see as pure archaeological sites. However, they do tell a story. They do give an idea of traditional use of the land from a set period of time. They're continually revisited, either hunting or fishing locales. And evidence of that was perhaps an abandoned Komatik. This is down in the Inuvik area. There were 7 rifles lined up in this fuel drum, and even an old hand-crank Singer sewing machine was at one of the traditional land use sites. Traditional land use sites vary from a whole monopoly of equipment, either household debris and hunting and fishing gear, to a single pop can. And we would touch down and document that site as well. It was evidence of that culture being there, those people being there, so we felt it necessary to record that location. Why are we doing this? The Government of the Northwest Territories and archaeological site regulations in the Northwest Territories state that every heritage resource, be it as simple as a stone flake to as complex as a whole village, must be avoided in any development. And it has to be avoided by a minimum of 30-meter buffer zone around the site. So what we basically did was, and this map illustrates, we would go in, if the site was very large, this is the site of Kittigaswit, and say, for example, we would take a center coordinate of the site, and then we block it in with GPS coordinates around the periphery of the site. If the site was something fairly difficult to ascertain as to the site dimensions, say it was on a bluff and it was a stone scanner, we walked out considerably further than what we thought the site boundary was, just to make sure that we were locking it in really tightly with our coordinates. Then the 30-meter buffer zone was placed around that site as well. So not only did we put the extra distance in when we recorded the coordinates, but there's also the 30-meter buffer zone in place as well. We did note some site impacts. However, with all the development that did occur this past few seasons up here, site impacts were relatively negligible from our perspective anyway. What we noticed, and this just gives you three future directions that we see this project going. Well, obviously, possibly assessing the impacts to heritage sites from the 2001-2002 drilling and seismic programs, and like I alluded to earlier, an in-depth traditional knowledge gathering, more interviews with the elders in order to get a little bit more information and help to further refine our map model.
Basically, they were asking whether any of the artifacts from the graves were being picked up or analyzed, and my answer to that is no, nothing from the graves was disturbed. Basically, whenever we came across a grave, we would lock it in with the GPS coordinates. However, none of the human remains was disturbed, was picked up, and none of the associated grave goods was disturbed as well. Another question had to do with the dating of the artifacts in the Mackenzie Delta. For accurate dating of many of the artifacts, it necessitates removing the artifact from the site to be dated through radiocarbon dating being one technique in an archaeological lab out of the area. We did not do that because it necessitated taking this artifact away from the site. Rather, for any of the sites that we dated, we looked at dating them through the typology or the morphology of the artifact itself.
Mostly I was interested in knowing about the heritage studies. I know we had to make sure they were all marked, like properly marked. We had a feeling that a lot of the sites weren't even marked, that they were, people just talked about them, but no one really pinpointed where they were. And now with this study, then they're going to be logged in somewhere, and people will always have a record of where not to go around, especially with all the seismic and eventually drilling.
I think by and large what the residents got from this presentation was perhaps a feeling of confidence, a feeling of comfort in the fact that we were looking for heritage sites. The more sites we found and that could be documented, that meant that they could be protected. These development programs that are continuing into this winter season, the 2001-2002 winter season, the known heritage sites that we've documented will be protected, and I think that the residents can gain some level of comfort from that.
Our culture, heritage, and traditions are directly tied to our land. There are many important sites that the Inuvialuit feel must be preserved and untouched. Development in our region will continue. The last time we saw a boom in our region, land claims had not been settled. The Inuvialuit did not have a say in the decision-making process about where and when development was occurring. Now we have processes in place to ensure that our needs are protected. We decide how developers conduct their business on our land. The Regional Heritage Resource Survey will be an important tool. We will tell the developers exactly where the important traditional, historical, and cultural sites are, and they will be preserved. This time around, we decide. We will protect the land. We, the Inuvialuit, are nothing without our traditions, our culture, and our land.